Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Champions of Self podcast. Thank you for being here today. My name is Ben Eden, your host, and I'm really excited about the topic today. It particularly hits home with me, the title being what I learned from an eating disorder, because I have a sister who went through this. And I really have her to thank for a lot of where I have come. You know, she was brave enough to go through the steps necessary to let us know what she was struggling with, and she got the help necessary for her to, be a lot better afterwards. And because she was brave enough to do that, I started to say, well, I guess I can start asking for help with what I'm struggling with. And that's been so valuable to me. So today I'm happy to welcome Morgan Danielle, who will also teach us from her experience what she learned from from an easy eating disorder. She is an emotional and eating disorder coach. So hello there, Morgan.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
No problem. Glad you're here. Morgan, tell us a bit more about who you are and what you do.
So my name is Morgan Danielle, and I healed through self-love. I healed my own eating disorder, and so I kind of wanted to share the love and help other women heal their eating disorder through self-love as well. So I'm a health coach, a Reiki practitioner. I'm licensed in neurological linguistics programming, and yeah, that's about it.
There you go. I like that NLP part. I'm going to work on that in the future, so then I'll have that cool part of me too.
Very cool.
So Morgan, let's start first. I always like to be able to address at least two different audiences, right? One part of the audience who may be experiencing an eating disorder, and the other part of the audience that really doesn't understand what it is. So from your story or from people that you work with, if you'd start with telling us just what is an eating disorder and then why somebody might be prone to that.
So an eating disorder is, it's when you use food as a coping mechanism to deal with your feelings. So there's a wide range of eating disorders. You can either have a binge eating disorder, or you can have a restrictive eating disorder, which is anorexia, or you can basically have both, which is bulimia. So you binge and then you purge. And it is, it's derived from an emotional aspect. It really isn't focused on the food. It's what is the root cause, which is your emotions and kind of what you're hiding from.
Great description. And like I said at the beginning of this, what you just said and what I learned from my sister truly opened my eyes to this idea of, oh my goodness, behavior is very much linked to emotions. We use behavior to try to hide from or quote unquote fix our emotions. And my goodness, if we could understand that, not only would we judge people less, but we'd also love ourselves more. Right? Exactly. Do you agree with that?
Yes, 100%.
Awesome. So how do you help, how did you heal yourself, and how do you help others with the healing from an eating disorder?
So I struggled with an eating disorder for over half my life. So over 10 years. I started when I was 11. I became anorexic, and I started with body dysmorphia. I would really restrict myself. I remember when I was 11, I would let myself have a handful of popcorn, and then I would go run up and down the stairs 100 times to like make up for it. And that followed me for a couple of years. And then I became bulimic, and then it became emotional eating. And so it was kind of throughout those 10 to 12 years, it was one or the other. So it was either emotional eating, it was binging and purging, and it was anorexia. So I remember, like I said, it's not about the food. It's once you start to heal other parts of your life. I just remember being so depressed. I had anxiety. I had post-traumatic stress disorder, and I would use food as like a punishment. It would be like a coping mechanism. I would use it as food as comfort, and then I would feel guilt and shame, and so I would purge. And so once I began to focus on myself and how to heal my emotions, and when I started working through my post-traumatic stress disorder, that's when the healing really began to take place. I wasn't really focusing on healing my eating disorder, I was focusing on healing my heart. And when I started doing that, that's when I noticed that my eating disorder really started to dissipate. It wasn't like this main focus. It was, food is always, or an eating disorder is always a symptom of the problem. A lot of people think that it is the problem, but it's really just a symptom. So I did go to therapy, and I did a lot of workshops, Joe Dispenza workshops, quantum physics, and Gabby Bernstein, their self-improvement books and podcasts. So I really started doing that, and meditation helped me so much. Like it connects you with yourself, and instead of hiding from yourself and trying to escape, you're looking within. And once you start being comfortable looking within, that's when it's not so scary anymore. So so after I started getting comfortable with myself and starting to love myself, that's when I began to heal my eating disorder.
That is so huge. I'm glad you said that, because I have tried to prove that point a couple times in other discussions where there's the principle of, if you focus on, well, it's more powerful to focus on what you want rather than what you don't want, right?
Exactly. Yes.
And when you heal your inner self and overcome those emotions, then the behavior that you've been turning to is no longer so attractive. That's so big. Very good.
Yeah, I love that.
Tell us how you felt about your body during this time.
I would always look in the mirror, and I would just pick myself apart. And I was a lot smaller than I am now. And I still thought that I was overweight. And I thought if I would just lose 5 more pounds, then I would be happy. If I lose 5 more pounds, then, you know, I'll be loved, or I'll be worthy of love, stuff like that. And I would always, like, you know, lift up my shirt and look at my stomach in the mirror and just like suck in and try to look skinnier than I was. And I felt disgusted with myself every single time I looked in the mirror. Half the time I wouldn't even want to look at myself.
So there's a quick thought I wanted to mention. And of course, I don't know everybody's beliefs of who's listening, but I believe in God and I believe in the devil. And the reason I mention that is because what I believe is that part of the reason we're here on earth is to gain a body and learn how to control that body using our agency. The devil knows that, and he is such a person that because he doesn't have a body, he not only wants us to make us miserable that we have a body, he wants to make us miserable because we have a body. Right. So these thoughts that we have, it's like, oh, my body is not perfect. It's never going to be perfect. I'm so disgusted because of my body. Oh my goodness. Those are real thoughts, aren't they?
Yeah. But the fact is that's not even our thinking.
Oh, good. Go on with that. I like that.
So I talk about the ego a lot, and our ego is kind of like the devil, like whispering in our ear, trying to pull us away from God, like our eternal source. And everything is love. You know what I mean? Like, we're supposed to love our bodies, be connected to our higher power. And our ego, the devil, is just whispering in our ear, trying to pull us away from that. And so we have to learn how to separate ourselves from these negative thoughts, because these negative thoughts are not our true, real, you know, we are not our thoughts. Sometimes our thoughts are just, are trying to pull us away from the love that we have for ourselves.
I love that we went over this. See, I didn't expect it. This is so good. Because yes, this principle of the sources of our thoughts, right? Some thoughts come from God. They're powerful. They're positive. They believe in our potential because they know our potential. Then we have our thoughts, and we have the thoughts that come from the devil. And a lot of people don't know that they can separate those, right? Like you're saying, when the devil puts those thoughts in our minds and says, oh, your body's terrible, you'll never be loved, and you're not worthy, this, that, and the other. If we don't realize that those can and do come from the devil, we might think they're coming from ourselves. And now, instead of fighting the real enemy, we're fighting ourselves. And it's just a never-ending spiral, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's cool. I didn't know you knew all that. So tell us a bit more, maybe where you learned it, or maybe some more about what you know.
I learned a lot from, I'm not sure if you're familiar with, I've done a lot of self-work, self-improvement over the years. I've read countless books, listened to countless podcasts. So Abraham Hicks is one of the sources that I learned that from, and also Gabby Bernstein. So what I've learned about the ego is that the ego is always trying, basically it's meant to be there to protect us, but it's really holding us back. Our ego wants to keep us small. And so when we're being kept small, we're not going to our full potential. And when we're not going to our full potential, we aren't serving, we're not serving our mission. And everyone is here for a mission. Everyone here has a purpose. And so when we're being kept small, we're not doing that purpose. So we have to learn to separate our own thoughts. Whenever, I still struggle with negative thoughts. Everybody does. But the most important thing is to recognize it, be mindful of that, and then choose another direction. So yes, you can have this negative thought of, I'm not good enough. But when you recognize it, you say, I recognize that I'm having this thought, and I choose love instead. So I always have that other thought whenever I'm bogged down by any negativity, or I notice myself going down in a spiral. We can always choose again. Every single thought that we have, it does not have to determine our mood, our day, our attitude, anything, because we always have the opportunity to choose again. Our feelings and our emotions are our responsibility, and it's so powerful that we get to choose that. And a lot of us, I know for myself, I forgot that for many, many years. And then it was very empowering for me when I realized that we do get to choose every single thing in our life and how we react to it.
I love that. That's so powerful. Within the thought of, what am I trying to get at? Let's see here. What kinds of thoughts can come through our mind, right? So you said you began with the eating disorder at age 11. Is that right?
Yeah.
And you had it for how many years?
12 years, 13 years.
Okay. So into your 20s, you passed through a lot of grades, right? Through high school, after high school. So why don't you walk us through a little bit, maybe some of the thoughts that went through your head that started to lead you towards not eating or eating too much and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So when I developed my eating disorder, I grew up in a very strict household, and I felt like I didn't have a lot of control. I always try to think back when this started, and kind of how I felt back then. And this is the realization that I've come to, but it has been a lot of years, so I'm not 100% sure. But I did not get to control pretty much any of my life. I didn't know anything about boundaries or anything like that. And so I remember making food diaries when I was 11, and I was only letting myself eat 500 to 600 calories a day, and I would really stick to that, and then I would excessively exercise. And so I always thought, like, this is the way that I can control this. Or if I felt any emotions, that was how I dealt with it, was by excessively working out or just restricting myself. And I always thought that the main thing was that I was not good enough. And every single time I ate something, I would think that I was disgusting, or I was going to get fat and I'd never be good enough. And then when I became bulimic, it was kind of the same thing. I just felt like I was so uncomfortable in my body. And so I thought the only way to fix that was by controlling things on the outside. Instead of looking within myself, I was trying to control what I was putting in my body, what I was doing with my body. And it continued like that. I had a couple of abusive boyfriends that really made my eating disorder worse, because they would tell me, they knew that I struggled with these thoughts, and so they would reinforce it whenever we'd get in a fight or something like that. They would tell me, I was fat, I was ugly, or something like that, because they knew I thought that about myself. And so that amplified it by a ton. And so just my whole basically for 12 years, I just thought that I was this person. I was not good enough for somebody to treat me well. I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't the cool kid or anything like that. So those beliefs really, really stuck with me. And then I kind of like, you know, when like a light switch comes on and you're like, why am I still living by these old beliefs? You know, I lived with these for so long, and it's like, why do I still think that? This happened 10 years ago or 5 years ago. Life is so much different now. Why am I still living by what that one person told me? You know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, those thoughts about my body weren't coming from me. It wasn't true, but I kept telling myself that same story, which kept me stuck in an eating disorder mindset.
Right. And you keep mentioning controlling something that you ate in an attempt to control something. If you've already answered it, I apologize, but what was it that you were trying to control?
I think just anything. I felt so like I wasn't allowed to be myself, and I felt very controlled by my parents, and so I thought that that was like the one thing that would make me feel better. And I kind of used it as a security blanket for a little while, and then all of a sudden you become trapped and you can't get out of this thing. You know, you essentially use it to feel good, and you feel good about controlling stuff for a little bit, and then it gets bigger and it gets harder to control, and then your emotions overtake you, and then you're not in control anymore.
Very good. I think this is important for people to realize, where right now we're talking specifically about an eating disorder, but like Morgan is telling us, we look to that behavior in an attempt to control how we feel, but after a while the behavior doesn't become or isn't enough, so we turn to something else. So even if you as a listener don't really deal with an eating disorder, you can relate somehow with what we're talking about. What is the behavior that you're turning to try to control those emotions? Having that in mind, let's hear what Morgan has to tell us. For her being a coach, you've come through your experience. You've gone through those years of eating disorder. You're now past that, and now you help others. So now that somebody's realized, okay, I relate with Morgan, or at least I can understand the idea that she's talking about. Now, my first step is, how can I admit to anybody, even myself, that I'm going through this and that I might need some help?
So admitting it to yourself is like a really scary step, because then it becomes real. And, you know, you can only deny it for so long until you're like, okay, yes, I realize that I do restrict food and then I binge later, or I do feel bad every time I eat, because a lot of people think that these eating disorders have to be extreme, you know, like inpatient extreme eating disorders, but it can literally be any negative thought around food. If you are feeling guilty every time you eat, if you, you know, if you're beating yourself up, or if you have poor body image, that is still, you know, considered disordered and emotional eating. And I think you just have to first admit it to yourself and sit with it and honor yourself and be like, I just went through a lot. Like, it's a big deal to admit that to yourself. And so just honoring your journey and not being critical of yourself for having a problem with an eating disorder, emotional eating. That's the very first step, is being kind to yourself.
Right. I like what you said, and I'm paying attention to the language that you use, that honor yourself, right? I mean, you could say it in any other way, but really it's validating what you've been through and being honest with yourself. And those are the first steps to moving forward. Even if it's a little bit scary, that's okay, because that's the part of opening the door, so then you can move on, right? Move forward.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is good stuff. So we spent a couple minutes diving into the idea of eating disorder, what it might mean, why you might turn to it. But like we said, we really need to heal the emotions, so then the eating disorder isn't really a big deal anymore, at least as far as the temptation goes, right?
Right.
So let's focus on that a bit more. What are maybe some common emotions that, and first of all, for the benefit of the listeners, is this something that only girls go through?
No.
True.
No, men go through this, women go through this, teenagers.
Hmm. Very good. Because again, one of the purposes of this podcast is that the listeners can say, oh my goodness, I'm not alone in how
No,
I feel, right?
men often think that they shouldn't have eating disorders, or they're one of the only ones. And there are so many men that have eating disorders and they have no one to talk to. And it's so sad because it's not as common, or maybe it is and just nobody's talking about it.
Exactly. One other thing that you mentioned too was the excessive exercising.
Hmm.
I don't know if I can fully connect the two, but I think they're related possibly, where it's your body image, right? You say, I need to be happy with my
Exactly.
body, therefore I'm going to work out day and night, but it's never going to be
Yep.
enough. So the
Yeah.
truth is, what we're going to talk about right now is, instead of all that, it feels good to look nice. Of course, it feels good to be
Yeah.
happy with our body, but there's a better way, or a more effective way, by dealing with the emotions. So back to that question, sorry. What are some common emotions that people feel, and how do you overcome those so that these behaviors aren't the proposed solution anymore?
So very, very commonly, I notice that a lot of my clients have told me, and in myself as well, that their emotional eating disorders often come at night. And that's when you feel lonely, low self-esteem, low self-worth. You don't feel good enough. You're stressed out. You don't feel in control. And I think, I think really a big one is loneliness, not
Mm.
feeling a connection with other people, not feeling fulfilled.
And you think that those feelings happen at night, and that might be why, because now they're alone, and then everything starts to pile in. Is that why?
Yeah, so a lot of the time during the day, you're busy, you've got a lot going on, and then at night when everything starts to settle down, that's when all the feelings that you pushed out during the day start to creep in. And since you push them off during the day, they come back even stronger. And
Mm.
so dealing with those, I actually I created a very specific nighttime routine
Okay.
to help people get out of that negative mindset and not turn to the refrigerator or um, whatever vice that they're using. So I did a whole body love routine where it starts with like a body massage, and then you use essential oils, and you can give yourself a scalp massage, and then like you wash your face. And this whole time you're honoring your body, because a lot of the time we're spending beating our bodies up and beating ourselves up. And so this body love routine, and during this body love routine, I always say to add gratitude for every part of your body, because your heart is working, your brain is working, your legs get you to where you need to go, your fingers help you to write. So the fact that you're giving gratitude for all those things makes you start to love your body instead of beating yourself up for having excess skin around your waist.
Mm.
Um, so that has been really, really helpful for my clients. And also EFT, I'm not sure if you're familiar, it's the emotional freedom technique, or
Let's hear
tapping.
it.
So it's where you tap on certain meridians in your body, and it resets the negative mindset into a positive mindset. So it's like rewiring the neurological pathways in your brain to create more positive thoughts and get rid of limiting beliefs. So that
Mm.
has also been a major part of my recovery.
This is such good stuff. My goodness. Where I like what you said about being grateful for the good parts about your body, right? I even talked to my sister right before this, and I was like, is there anything that you would like people to know? And she said, focus on the good that your body can do and be grateful for
Exactly.
that, right? Like for her,
Yeah.
it was, be grateful that my body can have a baby.
Yeah.
And by focusing on that, she was like, so helpful.
Yeah, right. It's amazing how quickly your mindset can turn when you think about all the things your body does do for you, because a lot of the time we spend thinking that our body is the enemy, and in reality it's what's keeping us here. And when we start to honor that, it's a total mindset shift, and I love it.
Hmm. Oh yeah. So let's do one more thing where we were very honest and vulnerable, where we said, hey, at night is a common time where these emotions come, where we feel lonely, and all these things of shame start to come up. And then you gave some tools, the EFT, the meditation. What was the first thing you said? Darn it. Anyway, good things. You can rewind and watch that, right? Is there anything else that you've done to help? Maybe reaching out or using a friend, somebody who understands, and you can be an an accountability partner, anything like that that helped?
I always, whenever, even being recovered, I still get triggered. And I think the biggest thing that has helped me is having a community, being a part of a community, having a solid friend group, surrounding yourself with people who love you and that you love, and that you have a good time with, is probably one of the most important things. When you feel loved and seen and heard and validated, you're not going to go looking for that in food or restriction from food. So I always make time for my friends. I always call a friend if I'm having a tough day. And I think that that's the absolute best thing that you can do.
Good. And one more thing, just because I think it's so valuable, the things that you are teaching us, and we can be quite specific. What if, so somebody who hears this and says, okay, I think it's a good idea to reach out to my friend, but what am I going to tell them? Am I going to say, oh, I think I'm going to eat popcorn? I mean, that just sounds dumb, right? So if somebody has that thought, what would you tell them? Or what might they be able to say when they call a friend?
If they call a friend, just say, I'm feeling whatever they're feeling right now. I'm feeling lonely. I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling anxious. And I just really need some support right now. You know, you don't even have to say particularly that you want to eat whatever's in your cabinet. You know, you don't even have to say that. All you have to say is, I really need some support, and I'm struggling. And your friends are going to be there for you, and they're not going to judge you. Your friends love you, and your family loves you. So when you become vulnerable and let that help in, it's going to be so beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to feel so alone.
Right. And now putting ourselves in the shoes of somebody who's a friend who might not quite understand what you're going through, let's say, what would be a word of advice to you? So say I'm the friend, you call me and say, hey, I'm feeling lonely, anxious, I'm dealing with some emotions. What can I do? Because I might feel like, oh, I don't know what to do.
Right. I think when somebody calls you with an issue, say, how can I help? How can I support you? Because yeah, you might not have the right things to say, but if you ask them what they need, then they're open to tell you. It's like, do you need me to be a sounding board? Do you just want to, talk my ear off for an hour? Or do you really want my advice? You know what I mean? And they're going to tell you what they need. And a lot of the time, people just want somebody to listen to them. That's really all they want.
Yep. And validate them for the feelings that they have, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Good. Wow, this has been some good stuff. Morgan, is there anything else that you'd like to tell us before we wrap up and hear how people can connect with you?
I think the biggest thing is never feel guilty for putting yourself first. You are important, you are worthy, and you are loved.
Perfect. Well, thank you. So how can people connect with you on social media if they'd like to do so?
Yes, so my Instagram handle is 2_well_with_it. And my Facebook is Morgan Danielle.
Sweet. Well, Morgan, thank you very much for being very specific and very helpful with your story and your experience. I think this has been very valuable for a lot of people who will listen.
Great. Thank you for having me.
No problem. And listeners, thank you again for joining. This has been another episode of the Champions of Self podcast. We will talk to you later.